Hey guys, how are things? I'm here and it's 420 somewhere, and we're going to talk today about gray markets, white markets, black markets. We're going to talk about markets in New York City specifically. All right, so I came across a pretty interesting article in Forbes. Forbes does a lot of marijuana reporting, and they have one in particular that has come out about New York City, or not New York City, New York, the state of New York, but New York City kind of working as an example of the rest of the state, where this state of New York has legalized marijuana. However, it's taken a long time for the retail business or licenses to be given out. It took a long time even for control boards to be announced and to be filled with people. The last governor wasn't really doing much, and now this new governor is trying to get the ball rolling and get things going. But within that span, there's this limbo period of marijuana being legal and retail stores not being open in the state, and in particular the city of New York. And because of that, there has been a lot of room for these markets that are illegally running, illegally owned, to sprout, that are still selling legal marijuana. So this is what people call the gray market. There are a number of ways that they do business to get past the loophole of it being illegal and getting shut down. One of them is to create a membership. They create a membership, and then you can go in and it's like $15 a day or whatever, and you can go in and buy marijuana within the store, or you can pay through a donation, and you're not actually buying marijuana, you're donating and then getting marijuana as a gift. Or you can then buy a t-shirt and then get gifted marijuana along with the t-shirt. So there are all of these ways that they get around the idea of saying, we're not selling marijuana here, we're donating marijuana, or we're giving away marijuana, or things like that. So it's really fascinating because they're really sprouting up everywhere in the city, and you can go to a bunch of these dispensaries who, by the way, have been given cease and desist letters from the Cannabis Control Board that is now up and running, saying that they are illegally running, and if they continue to run, they will not be given licenses, which would really suck for them, because then they no longer would be able to get into the actual industry when it does pop up, which would probably happen later this year or so. And the whole idea really of a lot of these businesses is to get up and running before the big businesses from Curaleaf or from MedMen here in California, all of these bigger businesses, before they just completely run the small guys out of town, which will probably happen and which tends to happen. So they're trying to get a head start before that happens. But if they no longer are able to get licenses, they're screwing themselves for later on. So it's kind of this really risky game they're playing, and they're hoping that the loopholes that they're doing, where they're not technically selling marijuana, are going to sustain their business until licenses are given out. There are then, of course, this much smaller ones that are just, because cannabis is legal in the state, they have stands at Times Square, and they're just selling marijuana or selling lollipops or whatever just from those stands, and they're just saying like, whatever, nobody's gonna do anything, and if we get caught, we get caught, but it's no big deal. There's an interesting part of the article where a reporter asks a police officer who is standing around the Times Square whether or not these stands are legal, and the police officer says no comment. So he's clearly been told that there's nothing he can do about these things. This whole thing paints a picture of it being a very gray area in New York right now, with all these dispensaries that are clearly not legally running, opening everywhere, but nothing can be done quite yet. My concern is that they're screwing themselves for when licenses do eventually be given out, and there's nothing they can do after that. Later in the article, it brings up a point that I find actually really interesting, and I haven't really looked at it from this perspective, where as long as you're taxing anything, as long as you're taxing, say, tobacco or alcohol or marijuana, there are going to be gray markets, and there are going to be black markets or illicit markets, because the more you tax, you'll have the legal market be over here, and then you'll have a larger spectrum within, where you'll have cheaper stuff but riskier stuff. And the more you tax, you'll be over here, and then you'll have the the gray market here where things will kind of be in between, and then you'll have the black market here where things will be very cheap but riskier. And that's just the way of the world. Like, gray markets are always going to be around as long as there are taxes being taken away from the cannabis. And you see that it's a push and pull. It's always going to be a push and pull. So we see in California where things are getting up to 35% taxes, and it's absurd and it's crazy, 38% sometimes. And because of that, the black market is running rampant. It's doing really well, and businesses kind of have to do both now to even sustain themselves. Every time something goes too far, it has to get reined back. The writer of this article took the example of alcohol in the 30s after Prohibition. The idea of bootleggers was kind of thrown away. However, in the 40s, when taxes on alcohol went way up just to pay for this war, bootleggers kind of thrived again. And so that's just the way of the world. That's how it's going to be. Whenever there's a taxed good, there will be a black market whose entire allure is that there are zero taxes on that good. So rather than trying to eliminate a black market or an illicit market, I don't know, which word should I say, illicit or black market? I'm not sure. So whether or not so instead of trying to eliminate it, we should try and at least regulate it a little bit. At least try and bring down the incentive for going there, and also make sure that it's not completely running into the world of kind of really shady characters. We need to be looking at the entire spectrum and not just one, hoping that the other side goes away. Yeah, so I found that article super interesting, and that's kind of it for today. One last thing, little update on this, microdosing marijuana pills. So I've been kind of taking these very infrequently. I found that I think they're kind of a bust. They're not really, there's not much to them. I don't really get much of an effect from them. I don't think they're anywhere near worth the $100 price point that I paid for these. So I would recommend not getting these. I don't think that they're worth your time and money. And that's that for today. We'll be back later this week with some more stories. I'll see you then.